This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and what's black and rubbery yet clean and good looking? It's the Dell Latitude 7389 and 7390. The 7389, which is the model that we received, is the Intel 7th generation version, but they're just now releasing the Intel 8th generation model, which is the 7390. Exactly the same laptop, just updating the CPU. So pretty much everything's going to hold true here that we say about this model other than the CPU performance. We'll talk about that. Anyway, the Latitude is Dell's business line of computer, which, you know, the XPS line, like the XPS 13, which is another 13.3-inch laptop with a 12-inch footprint, is both consumer-facing and sort of high-end corporate and business. So this one goes up against the ThinkPad line of products. And Dell just really wanted to up their game and go for something that could compete with the ThinkPad X1 Yoga, for example, because this one has 360-degree robust hinges on it, which is nice, something the Dell XPS 13 doesn't do. The Dell XPS 13 2-in-1, sure, but with lower powered CPUs. This has full U-series CPUs inside for good horsepower. A lot of options that corporate people like, but a price tag that's not that bad either. Oh, and by the way, Wacom AES digitizer here, so pen and touch, both in the box. We're going to look at it now. Now, you IT types already know this, but for those of you who aren't, Dell Latitude are typically more in the business line of laptops, but for several years now, they've been trying to make them kind of like sexy and appealing so that everyday people would enjoy them, not just so that workers are happy when the IT department hands it to them, because some of you small business type folks out there, individual buyers, might want to buy them too. The selling point is that robust build, good looks and kind of classy, sort of like the XPS, with some variety of options that you won't necessarily see in the XPS, including things like LTE modem inside and, well, the pen and other nice features. It starts out around $1,150 for the Core i3 model, which probably a lot of you are going, poo-poo, I wouldn't buy that. Okay, I get that. And $1,350 for a Core i5, $1,740 for a Core i7. Now, if you get the Core i7, that brings you up to 16 gigs of RAM. The others have 8 gigs of RAM. They all start with an M2 SATA 3 128 gig SSD, which ain't much, but you can upgrade. Like ours came with the Samsung PM961 M2 PCIe NVMe SSD, and that upgrade wasn't that much money on Dell's website. So you have a bunch of options there. Now, those are for the Intel 7th generation 7389 model. If you're going for the 7390, typically the prices are about $100 more. And you know how Dell is. They do have sales, so also keep an eye on that. No matter what, you're going to get a 2-in-1 with a Gorilla Glass Full HD IPS display. It's glossy. It's supposed to have an anti-glare sort of coating on it. Not so much, but Gorilla Glass is usually one of the most glary out there, and it's not that obnoxious with glare, so perhaps it is a bit effective. And you're going to get that Wacom AES digitizer, which works with the pen that was in our box. I believe it is included. And that's the Dell Active Pen, which is the PN557W. Now, they've made other Wacom AES pens, and those are going to work too. This is just the latest generation of pen that Dell is churning out right now. So for those of you who don't know, Wacom AES is, well, a lot like N-Trig, just made by Wacom instead. They're both pens that have a quadruple A battery inside and a passive digitizer. Technically, the digitizer is the part built into the display because the pen is supplying the power with that battery. That typically lasts between 6 months and a year, so it's no big deal that it actually takes a battery. They're both about equally as good. There's no tilt on this, and I believe that this is the one with 2,000 levels of pressure sensitivity, not the 4,000, which would matter to artists more than note takers. It does a good job with diagonal lines. You can see that on screen. I was pretty impressed at the lack of jitter there and the responsiveness. Thanks, in fact, you've got full Core i3, i5, and i7 CPUs. We have the dual-core model, the 7th gen, which performs very well. It's the i7-7600U. Of course, if you go for the 8th generation, you're going to double your cores. You're going to get significantly more performance. So I would recommend doing that. Again, everything else is going to be the same on these. The display itself is actually pretty good. It's competitive with other laptops in this price range, including some consumer ones. Consumer-oriented ones like the Yogas at Best Buy or the XPS 13 typically have a little bit better displays because consumers are a little pickier than business folks are. So the idea goes. Full HD is the highest resolution you can get on it. That's okay with me because at 13.3 inches, it looks pretty darn sharp, honestly. One thing I will note is that it can get toasty, surprisingly so, for an Ultrabook with a 15-watt CPU inside. You'll hear the fan now and again, more often now and now, and then not. It's not really super loud or anything like that, but it surprised me. The heat's a little bit, you know, but they've got a pretty compact chassis here, so there you go. Intel HD 620 or UHD 620 graphics is the only option. You don't usually see dedicated graphics on something this small. It has two USB-C ports, and it works with Dell's USB-C docks and a USB-C to DisplayPort adapter, and other companies too. USB-C is a universal, in theory, kind of thing. The 7th generation is only USB-C. They do list an option for Thunderbolt 3 with the 8th generation model. And you have your normal ports too. Of course, a headphone jack, HDMI, and you've got two USB Type A ports as well, and a micro SD card slot, and again a nano SIM card slot for that optional LTE. Works with, it's a Snapdragon X7 modem, and it works with Sprint, Verizon, and AT&T. Doesn't support T-Mobile though, according to Dell's official specs, if you want to go with that option. Now with the display, there's an interesting thing. They have the standard bezel and the narrow bezel, which is what we have, and they have sent out to all the reviewers. It's the narrow bezel model. And of course, it looks better, changes the thickness and the footprint ever so slightly, not surprisingly there. The only difference is you can't get the teeny bezel display with an IR camera for Windows Hello, facial recognition login. Isn't enough room up top, but at least the webcam is up top instead of the chin cam that you get on the XPS 13. Overall, in terms of portability, it is compact, not unlike an XPS 13, and it feels a lot smaller, say, than the 14-inch ThinkPads, well, because ThinkPads are 14 inches, and because they don't have particularly small footprints, and it's fairly light. You can see the weight on screen right there. One thing I really like about this is the build quality. Man, this thing is solid. This is not something you're going to want to drop on your toe. You've got definitely lots of metal inside here in the chassis, and really nice touches, like this little sculpted drop down that you have by the trackpad. I also like the fact that you have two soft touch discrete mouse buttons here instead of the whole movable trackpad kind of buttonless design on this. It's a Microsoft Precision trackpad on this. The keyboard isn't bad. It depends on what you like these days. Some people really like very short travel keyboards. It has more travel than the XPS line of laptops, 1.6 millimeters. I like the feeling a lot. Honestly, I appreciate the extra travel. It's not too punishing when you hit bottom. It's pretty good, and it's backlit keyboard as well. Overall, it's a good-looking laptop. The 360-degree hinges, two-stage motion here. It's just very robust, and in terms of the display bounce, it's a bit less than you see on a lot of other laptops. When you shake it, it's not going ooh, 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 down. I mean, this is pretty stiff stuff here. So, good job that Dell did there. In terms of performance, it's like any other Ultrabook on the market. Again, go for the 8th generation if you want more performance. It's definitely worth the extra $100 unless Dell starts having a great sale on the 7th generation CPUs where you can save several $100s. And it's as capable as any other laptop of doing office work. It works fine with Photoshop. You can see me drawing here in ArtRage. It can handle Photoshop just as well too. So it's not a gaming laptop, no kidding. It's not a mobile workstation for CAD and engineering, but for everyday business and schoolwork, it will do the job. It does, like I said, get a little bit hotter and louder than some other laptops, but given how compact it is, that's not surprising. In terms of battery, there's two different batteries available with the Intel 7th generation Latitude 7389. There's a 45 watt hour and a 60 watt hour. There's like a $20 difference in price, so go with the 60 watt hour, right? It's only going to be slightly heavier. With the 8th generation, they pretty much standardized on that 60 watt hour battery. So it's going to depend on which battery you buy, obviously, when you get the model configured. We're going with the 60 watt hour values there, and that's a good 6 to 7 hours of battery life there, which is pretty typical. It's not stellar or outstanding, but it's decent enough. You get a 45 watt charger for $3.50 more. You can get the 65 watt charger. The only difference there is it charges a bit more quickly. Yeah. And this is what the charger looks like. This is the 65 watt one, the same one that you see on all the higher end Dells. This kind of little stylish round guy with the shiny ends, and it plugs into the one of the USB-C ports, of which you have two, so you still can use another USB port to connect to peripherals. To get inside, it's pretty easy. By the way, good amount of ventilation here, and these are the grills for the pretty average sounding speakers. So just Phillips head screws, all readily visible. You pry it off. It's not too hard to get it off, and there we have mostly battery inside. Yeah, we have the 60 watt hour battery. This is the M2 SSD. They have a heatsink on top of it, since this is the faster PCIe NVMe SSD. That's a good idea because they do run kind of hot. The usual single fan and Right under there would be your CPU. So this mysterious thing is one of those pry-up things, and there's really nothing to see under there. There's no RAM slot or anything like that. So RAM is soldered on board. You can either get it with 8 gigs or 16 gigs, and then Dell seems to tie that to what CPU you've picked. Like the i7 gets the 16 gigs, the i3 and i5 get the 8 gigs. And there's our Wi-Fi card right there. It's a Qualcomm Atheros card. It's a good one for those of you who don't like Intel Wi-Fi. It's perfectly acceptable. And this is where it says WWAN, where the socket is for the LTE-A Qualcomm Snapdragon X7 modem, should you go with that option. And that is the SIM card slot, nano SIM card slot right there. So it would be wired here, and there would be more antennas running off of it, probably following the Wi-Fi antennas. So that's the Dell Latitude 7389 and the 7390 if you want the newer model with the double fast CPU, which I would certainly recommend. There's only like $100 difference between the two of them. Obviously, it's a little more attractive if you go with that narrow bezel option display there. It's nice that it has WWAN, LTE, if you want to be able to use this when you don't have Wi-Fi available, which a lot of business travelers want. It's styling, you know, it's styling enough looking in a clean sort of way, nice small footprint. The rubbery texture feels really cool and is very grippy, less likely to drop it. Yeah, it does show fingerprints, but you can clean it up. So overall, it's pretty likable, and it's for those of you who are Dell people more than your Lenovo people, it's certainly a nice alternative to the ThinkPad X1 Yoga that's on the market, and a smaller footprint to boot. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos, and thumbs up if you like this vid.